We cannot communicate with anyone as there is no internet connectivity. We cannot go to the market. Children cannot go to school. We can't go outside of our home, and when we step out of our home, we need to go to the police. Law enforcers detain us, and no one can move in any direction.
Let's get more on this from Hasan Mahmud, a Bangladesh affairs analyst and professor of sociology at the Northwestern University in Qatar, who joins us now live from Doha. Thank you very much for your time. The government made some concessions, didn't they, on Sunday? It doesn't seem to have done any good, and tensions remain high.
Thank you for having me. I understand the issue from a different perspective. Despite government making some concession and revising the distribution of quotas, seem kind of like should be enough to quell the anger of the students, protesting students, and encourage them to go back home. But it's not happening. And it's not happening because the issue from the get-go had not been the quota itself. It is much more. So if you remember, the term that instigated the entire protest movement was Razakar, which is associated with the tiny minority of Bangladeshis who stood against the freedom fighters during the War of Independence in 1997. Right. So obviously people, I mean, it is a derogatory term and people don't want to be associated with this term. But there has been a new emerging, reality about this term. It is not just a derogatory term, but it has other practical meaning, which is dreadful. So to understand that, to understand the widespread, protest and opposition against throwing this term, labeling the student protesters as Razakar, we need to understand something more, like social processes that embed the entire thing, including the protest and the reasons for that. So I would ask you to look at a framework to understand how socially how these kinds of social events happen. One is exclusion, right? In a society, we live together, but there are some instances, there are some factors that make a few people excluded from the majority in the society, right? And then those excluded people are dehumanized for whatever reason, for a number of factors, through through different processes depending on the social context of that happening. They are dehumanized, and once they are dehumanized, they're excluded first. Second, they're dehumanized, and third, if the power elites or if the powerful section of the society wants them to get rid of them, they can do so with certain level of success. That's what has been happening in Bangladesh, at least for past 2 decades. So Razakar, we need to understand this term with another term which is more commonly used in Bangladesh, which is Shibir, the student wing. So once someone is recognized or labeled as Shibir, it almost becomes like certain that the person would be subject to exclusion, dehumanization, and sometimes even annihilation with impunity, both in the hands of law enforcement agencies and the student wings and other organizations of the ruling government.
So Hasan, I just want to cut in, if you don't mind. The Prime Minister has said that this is being orchestrated by the opposition. From what you're saying, though, this is much more organic.
Yeah. So exactly, Prime Minister's statement actually substantiates what I am just trying to explain. So the first of January of this year, I actually Googled online, and I found that there had been 412,000 of news reports about Shibir Shandehe, which means like another term very much closely related with Razakar. So people, students were labeled as Shibir or Razakar, and they were beaten sometimes to death. And most of those news do not make into public discussions because it has been normalized that Shibir or Razakars can be beaten, can be physically abused, and can be excluded without any repercussion. So when Prime Minister called the protesters, students protesters who demanded equal share or fair access to government jobs, when they were called Razakar, it was not just derogatory. They were not just hurt because they don't want to be associated with the term Razakar, but it also involved a huge amount of actual fear. Because once Prime Minister calls someone Razakar or group of people, group of students Razakar, it becomes almost immediately obvious that these students would be beaten in their dormitories, in their universities, and they would be banished actually. That's exactly what happened or what about to happen, which did not happen because the entire student population erupted. They were not just criticizing, they erupted and they demanded that this time this label is not going to work. We are not going to stay within the binary that had been created in past at least 2 decades, but it's actually more decades, between those who are the freedom fighters and those who are the enemy of the state. Large number of people, I would say like 90% or 99% of people actually are in between these two binaries, like Razakars and freedom fighters.
Okay. Hasan, thank you very much. Hasan Mahmud there in Doha. Thank you for your thoughts and for your insight.